This is our budget study session, and Mrs. Northall, may we call the roll call?
Mayor Schilling?
Here.
Councilmember Beltramini? Here. Hill? Here. Eisenbacher?
Here.
Fleming?
Here.
Howard?
Here.
Kerwin? Here.
Quorum present. Okay, this evening we're meeting for the 2009-2010 budget presentation, and so I should indicate to the public, and council of course knows, we spent all those many hours looking at things, prioritizing everything, and it looks like that's all been captured and encapsulated into this budget. And there's some special things about this budget that make it another award-winning, outstanding presentation. So I will turn it over to Mr. Zerlag and Mr. Lamorato to present to us.
Your Honor and members of the council, when I came here 3 weeks ago, the budget document was essentially assembled. I had no input thereof. I would thus request that Mr. Lamorato and his good staff make the budget presentation tonight, and next time as well. My only role would be to assist in answering any questions that may come up that there's not an answer for tonight.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'd like to begin by thanking Mary Redden and Beth Tashnik of our manager's office for producing this document and continuing to improve upon our fine award-winning document. Before the PowerPoint presentation, I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about the budget preparation, obstacles in developing this budget, some notable accomplishments, and some concluding remarks. As far as budget preparation, this is our first budget using our new financial software system, New World Systems, and it worked out very well. We've also heard a lot of positive comments from our departments when they were assembling their budgets. Some of the features of the new software are a paperless submittal of the departmental budget request. Notes, memos, and supporting documentation were all electronically attached to their request. We had a 5-year budget and actual history by line item at the touch of a key for departments to take a look at. And also it was very easy to customize reports, put together just about any information you wanted to get out of the budget. Knowing that we were facing an estimated $5.6 million deficit for the 2009-10 budget, City management initiated discussions with City Council back in November to come up with ways to bring the budget into balance. City Council completed a deficit reduction survey, which included potential new revenue sources and potential expenditure saving measures. After several meetings and updates, we were able to reduce the deficit by $3.6 million. We knew that there was a good likelihood that we may have to lay off some employees in addition to those employees that took advantage of our retirement incentive plan. We had 26 employees who took advantage of the retirement incentive plan. 9 of those employees were not replaced. Upon receipt of the initial budget request and after our first pass-through of the budget, it was evident that we needed to make further cuts in the labor force, and unfortunately, several employees' positions were eliminated. The layoff saved over $700,000. The remaining difference was made up by reductions in various departments' budgets to end with a balanced budget with no reliance on fund balance. Some obstacles in developing a budget. We had a reduction in our taxable value for the city of 1.85%, or $103 million in taxable value citywide. That portion that relates to our net city operations was a 1.3% reduction and over $70 million in taxable value that we lost. Current interest rates are still, for our city investments, that are earning under 1%. State shared revenue is flat at best. No utilization of fund balance, and there's also pressure on the refuse tax rate. Some notable accomplishments: we balanced the budget without utilization of any fund balance. The general fund budget decreased by 3.7%. We had an overall reduction in all expenditure objects, personal services, supplies, and other service and charges. The total budget for the city decreased by 2.3%. And also, we were a recipient, again, of the GFOA Distinguished Budget Presentation Award for the 10th consecutive year. Some concluding remarks. We can now project with some certainty that our taxable value will decrease approximately 21% over the next 5 years. This will put tremendous pressure on providing the level of service that our citizens are accustomed to, how we do business, our fund balance, and property tax rate. Things to consider when reviewing the budget is how to handle the .07 mil transfer from the capital fund to the refuse fund, and also consideration of discontinuing the accumulation of funds in the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority revolving account, which will stand at the end of this fiscal year at $1.7 million, and return future tax increment capture revenue to the city and other taxing jurisdictions. This would mean approximately $392,000 for the city of Troy and around $290,000 in the general fund. It will take an amendment to the Brownfield plan to halt further additions to the revolving fund. We are currently in our second of a 5-year plan. Any general questions before we get into the PowerPoint? Start off with tonight's agenda. We're going to have an overview of the budget, look at the general fund, special revenue funds, internal service, and debt service funds. Next Monday, we'll cover the capital projects, enterprise funds, and have our wrap-up. And then the following Monday, May 11th, we'll have the public hearing and adoption of the budget. We started the implementation of a new budgeting process, budgeting for outcomes. And the outcomes are intended to encompass the current style of the times as well as the future. City Council adopted a wide-ranging outcomes in an attempt to provide flexibility for changes that impact the budget. Outcome statements that were agreed to are that Troy enhances the livability and safety of the community. Troy adds value to property through maintenance or upgrades to infrastructure and quality of life venues. And Troy is rebuilding for a healthy economy, reflecting the values of a unique community in a changing and interconnected world. Outputs are a means by which the outcomes are put into action. And funding will be allocated according to how the activities are rated. If there's a shortage of funds, those activities in the basic priority funding segment will be looked at first. Outputs that receive priority funding, I'm not going to read through all of these, but they're in the budget document and they've been established. We have several of them that are in a priority funding, and a lot of them dealing with health and safety, welfare. Continuation of some of the priority funding. The next level of funding, we move into the intermediate funding outputs. Some of these simplifying the permitting process, continue to provide cultural, recreational services, so forth. I won't read through all these again. There's several of them. Continuation of the intermediate funding outputs. And the last level, or the basic funding level, use of capital funds, grants, community contributions, develop more marketing and branding information, encourage staff to continually develop their skills, professional organizations, and so forth. These all make up the basic funding, or the lower priority funding for the budget. These were all taken into consideration when we developed this current year's budget. A description of our budget document. It's meant to be an operations guide, a financial plan, and a communication device. I'm going to stress that the budget is a financial plan. It's something we work together, staff, and work together with all the departments' involvements and put together a plan on how we would expend the funds of the city for the next year, plan to. It also gives us a framework to account for all activities. This budget document is not, it's all in our financial system. That is a means that we keep track of the revenues and expenditures for the city and next year's operations. Some expenditure highlights. The general fund came in at a little over $62 million, or a 3.7% decrease. The capital fund stayed basically the same, $28.5 million, a little reduction. All the other funds came in at around $59 million, or a 1.1% reduction. Total budget for the city is $149.5 million versus $152.8. $3.3 million reduction, or 2.2% reduction overall. Some budget highlights. Once again, a 3.7% decrease in the general fund, $28.7 million in capital projects. We've included all the debt service for the voter-approved 1999 debt issues. Budgetary accounting, again, by individual employee. And you may have noticed we went through the capital section that we've expanded that section quite a bit by providing project narratives, maintenance cost, and operational cost savings related to all the major public works projects. This was something that was asked for in the past and also was a comment from our reviewers in GFOA that we needed some improvement in the capital projects area, so we looked at that, and hopefully you'll find that with the detailed maps and more easy to follow, and gives you quite a bit more information. Personnel summary. 71% of the general fund expenditures are tied up into personnel expenses, which is wages and all fringe benefits. And from other numbers that you've heard from the school district, other places, which are around 80% or so, I think we're in a pretty good shape. I'm not saying 71% is still a big portion of our budget, but I've heard a lot of Sterling Heights is 82%, school district 80%. So at 71%, I think we're fairly lean. We did have a reduction of 24 full-time positions most of them through attrition and some layoffs. That brings our total full-time employees to 443, and we have 496 part-time employees. A listing here, I won't go through them. These are a listing of the departments and the positions that were reduced in the full-time status. And a continuation in a second, took 2 pages this year. Job responsibilities were redistributed amongst current employees and outside contractors, and as needed, especially in the inspection, planning, and engineering areas, as needed, those services will, those are the heavier hit departments, and those will be used outside services as needed. As far as just a recap on the part-time positions, and there were no part-time positions that were added because of the reduction in the full-time staff. But we did have a reduction of 47 part-time positions overall. And there's a basic listing of those positions throughout most departments. Having Parks and Rec and golf courses made up most of those. In the library department, their library assistants were 10 reduction, but they were able to reclass those positions into library aides at a lesser cost and still provide that service. Look at full-time employees per 1,000 population. We're at 5.04 full-time employees per 1,000. You can see a dramatic decrease this last year, and from 2004, basically, we've reduced the full-time staffing. Since 2003, we have reduced our full-time employees by 47 full-time positions. Some key trends and issues in the general fund. Start with just a general fund overview. No reappropriation of fund balance to balance the budget this current year for 2009-10. In the current year, we used $4.1 million that was reappropriated. That equates into absorbing about 0.79 mils without reducing, with keeping our same tax rate. We absorb 0.79 mils throughout all the various revenue enhancements and expenditure savings. The unreserved undesignated fund balance is at $10.8 million, or 17.5% of our general fund budget. Last June 30th, 08, it was at 8.7 or 13.5%. We knew going in with the people and the people taking advantage of the incentive plan and so forth that there would be some additional savings this year to build up our fund balance, and it's showing here that we were able to increase it. 23 of the 24 fewer full-time positions are in the general fund, and also includes a transfer of $250,000 from the budget stabilization fund. That leaves $1,850,000 in that fund. We are approaching and will possibly surpass our upper limit of the 17% unreserved undesignated fund balance policy. And this year that number is probably, if things come out as we're projecting, it'll be about $300,000 over the 17% limit. And the 17% limit is pretty high compared to most cities. Most of them try to keep around at least 10% or so. We target the 17% because we feel it's 2 months of operations, and we feel that's a pretty safe cushion to have. Where the city gets its revenues: federal, state, and local returns, $6.9 million, 11.2% of the budget versus 10.8 last year. Fines and forfeitures, $1.1 million, 1.7 of the budget versus 1.6 last year. Licenses and permits, $1.6 million, 2.5% versus 2.8% last year. Property taxes, $35.9 million, 57.9% of our budget versus 56.4%. Interest and rents, $1.5 million and 2.5% versus 2.3 last year. Other revenue and finance sources, $7.1 million, 11.5 versus 15.5 last year, and that's because we do no longer reappropriation of fund balance in that revenue source. And charges for services, $7.9 million, 12.7% of the budget versus 10.8 last year, due to all the different fee increases and so forth we talked about and were approved by council. General fund revenue trends by source. You can see there's not a lot of movement there, but sources of revenue that had reductions in revenue for this coming up year: taxes were down $425,000, licenses and permits $255,000, federal, state, and local sources $24,000, and operating transfers in about $2.9 million. Those sources of revenue that saw an increase this year: we had charges for services were up almost $900,000, fines up $75,000, interest and rents up $66,000, and other revenue sources were up $141,000. Taking a look at the major sources of revenue categories, once again, taxes $35.9 million, a decrease percentage-wise of 1.16%. License and permits, 1.58 million, decrease of 13.7%. Federal, state, and local, 7 million, 0.03% reduction. Charges for services were up 12.57, fines up 7%, interest rates and rents 4.08, other 28.57, and operating transfers in a reduction of 32%. Out of the $62 million in revenue in the budget, 82% of the revenue sources decreased from this current year to the proposed budget. 82%. Looking at our next net taxable valuation, after removing the Downtown Development Authority, the Brownfield, and the LDFA, we have a 2009 taxable value of about $5.2 billion. That's a reduction for net city operations of $70.4 million, or 1.3%. Reductions in a real property tax value of $66.4 million. That comes after an adjustment by Proposal A of 4.4%, but we still lost 1.4% in real property, even with that adjustment. Reduction in personal property of $4 million, or 1%. It's less than some of the years in the past, going down a little bit, but it's also our 8th year in a row that we've had a reduction in personal property tax revenue. Net taxable value, you can see the top line basically is a real property and has stopped its, or it's basically started its decline in value, in which we're probably going to see for the next at least 5 years, that continuing to go down. Personal property is relatively flat, but it's a very slight decrease over that period of time. Taxable value as a percentage of assessed value. We are continuing to close the gap between our taxable value and assessed value. We're approaching 90%. What means that basically Proposal A is not going to, as we saw this year and as we'll see in the next several years, Proposal A, even if there may be an increase in the consumer price index, the more closer we get to, in our case, we're going to further reductions in our overall taxable value because of the amount of properties that are already at the assessed value level. But we're closing that gap, and we'll probably get there within the next couple years. As evidence this year, even with a 4.4% CPI adjustment to taxable value, we had an overall decrease in taxable value of 1.3%. Of roughly 27,000 residential parcels, 46% have their taxable value less than assessed value. 46% have their taxable value less than assessed value. That means they have some movement in capturing some new taxes. 54% of all residential property, as it stands right now, the taxable value is equal to assessed value. So if you have a reduction in your market values, you're seeing that a decrease in all those properties. The total value, though, of resident, that's just the number of parcels. If you look at the total value of residential property, though, we only have a 5% differential between assessed value and taxable value. And as far as commercial and industrial, we're at about a 50-50 mix there of the properties that are assessed value is equal to taxable value, and only a 10% differential in assessed value versus taxable value. Total taxable value by class, a 10-year trend. Residential, we made a little bit of progress here, but made up 57% versus 58% last year of our total taxable value. Commercial stayed basically the same. Industrial went up 1%, 12% from 11%. Ideally, we'd like to be at a 50% mix of residential versus commercial and industrial. Let's say not many cities, or hardly any cities, I would think, are at that, but we were at that level back in 2001, And prior to that, for several years, we were at that mix. It's a very nice mix to have, but it's becoming more and more increasingly difficult, especially with the residential market. Real estate taxes for the year. Estimated tax levy for all taxing jurisdictions. A lot of them are in the same process we are, or some don't come up until later in the year, but we're estimating or using their current tax rate in those instances. The average Troy residential taxable value is $120,014 compared to $124,885 last year. The average taxable value residential tax bill for city services went down $45 per year. Once again, 54% of residential taxpayers will see a reduction in their city tax bill. 50% of the commercial and industrial properties will also see a decrease in city taxes for next year. Breakdown of our dollar bill, once again 27 cents, which has remained the same basically, is for the city of Troy. 27 cents out of each tax dollar goes to the city of Troy. Schools are around 55 cents. County and community college, 18 cents. And I'm sure we all know that we are the collecting agency for all taxing jurisdictions. If you could read the gold there, but we added a new column this year to our real estate taxes and the effect of Proposal A, because we're having so many properties that have reached the taxable values equal to their assessed values, just to show what the result is for those people versus the ones who still have some gap between their taxable value and assessed value. So once again, there's 3 homes that we used for a number of years. The first home had about a $150,000 market value in 2002. The black numbers there, taxable value, that's the increase with Proposal A each year. What happened to the value of that home, starting back in 2002 and working its way to the current year. Now, if there was still room between the taxable value and assessed value for that home, their taxable value would have went up 4.4% this year. So it would have went from 87,303 to 91,444, which would have went, their city taxes would have been $845 or a $35 increase for those people. We try to show here is that, let's say, for example, that property assessed value for these homes equaled their taxable value. And so we capped it off at last year, the current year, 87,303. We had a 7.7% reduction in a lot of residential areas. That taxable or assessed value and taxable value would have went down to $80,581. And their city taxes would have gone down to $748. And that is a reduction of $62. So depending on your situation, a lot of people were crying, I guess we'll say, for those years that, we are a new home buyer and so forth. Well, now the new home buyers are the ones that are seeing some reduction in their taxes, and the existing homeowners are still seeing that increase if your taxable value isn't equal to your assessed value. The same just shows for the next house, which was a $200,000 market value home. Shows you what happens there. A 4.4% increase went from $116,405 to $121,527. If you had the 7.7% reduction, your taxable and assessed value would have went down to $107,442, and you would have had $83 in savings for taxes next year. If you were still under the assessed value, you would have had a $48 increase in taxes. And the last one was a $400,000 market value home. The same thing, basically, Proposal A effect. If your assessed value was equal to your taxable value, you would have went from $232,811 to $214. Your taxes would be just under $2,000, or you'd be paying $166 less in taxes this next year. The first year we really had, because there's such a number of residential properties that are affected by it, the first year we had to really show this type of, add another column here to show what the effects were to the property owners. Summary of millage requirements. Once again, we have this budget maintains the same tax rate, 9.28 mills for city operations. Operating millage rate remains at 6.50. refuse needed an increase of 0.07 mils to maintain the same tax rate. The capital budget was reduced to 0.07 mils, the millage rate from 1.60 to 1.53. Debt remains at 0.50 mils. As far as the refuse millage rate, this will be one item for discussion, I think, even tonight or next week in the wrap-up. But in 2007-8 budget, we reduced the refuse millage by 15 cents because of the new renegotiated contracts. But due to increased cost and the taxable value decrease, has resulted in a need to increase that millage rate by 0.07%. City Council can decide whether to recapture 0.07 from the 15 cents that was reduced, or take the 0.07 mils from the capital fund. The 0.07 mils for the average residential home is worth $8.40 a year. Once again, just a 11-year history of our tax rates. The Headley rollback in our maximum authorized millage. In November 2008, Charter Amendment reduced our general operating and capital millage rate from 10.0 mils to 8.10 mils, our current rate for our operating and capital millage. So what happens, we changed our charter number to 8.10 Headley. There was no Headley adjustment, 8.10. The proposed millage is 8.03 because we removed 0.07 cents from capital and added it to refuse. So there is available now funding, and I know it's up for interpretation of how that all works, but we are under the rate of 8.10 mils as it stands right now. And the refuse collection, 3% is the state maximum. Headley brought that to 2.55, and we're proposing 0.75. We have 1.80 available. Comparison of municipal millage rates. Some surrounding cities. We continue to have the lowest tax rate of any full-service city, 9.28. Taking a look at comparison of city tax bills based on our average residential taxable value of a little over $120,000. Madison Heights property owner would pay $2,179 versus our $1,114, or $1,065 more for the same valued house. Southfield, just under $2,000, would pay $847 a year more for city taxes. Birmingham, well under $1,700, would pay $577 a year more. Rochester Hills, $1,531, pays $417 more per year. Farmington Hills, $1,393, $279 more a year. Royal Oak, $1,372, $250 a year more. And Sterling Heights, $1,288, or $174 a year more for the same valued home. State shared revenue, 2010 estimated amount is $6.6 million. In the budget, we're taking about a $50,000 less than our estimated 2009 receipts are. We think there's going to be some reduction this next year, and we're not sure if that's going to be enough to cover that or not. But we do have a $50,000 cushion built in there. This revenue source makes up 10.6% of our general fund budget, and we're 1.7 million below the 2001 level, which is the equivalent, again, of 0.33 mils that we've had to make up and absorb without raising taxes. General fund investment income, once again tied to interest rates and our fund balance, projecting $600,000 in revenue for 2010 from this source, and negating some of the interest rate declines is our larger fund balance does help us and provide us some additional funds to invest, and funds that could be invested for different periods of time. So that has helped to negate some of the less than 1% investment yield. Our general fund balance, we're projecting at June 30th, 2009 that our total general fund balance will be about $21.6 million. That's a cumulative result of excess revenues over expenditures. The only way you could have a positive fund balance is if you take in more revenues than expenditures. So from day one, this is a continuous amount that gets adjusted every year. The city must have done some things right over all those years to have $21.6 million in reserves. Since 1997, we have doubled our fund balance. And for the current year's budget, of the $4.1 million that we have budgeted and reappropriated fund balance, we're estimating that we probably need to use a little over $2 million of that. Our expenditures are estimated to come in at $2.2 million under budget for the current year. Now look at general fund balance. This is our unreserved, undesignated fund balance as a percentage of the budget. We're estimating that at June 30th, 2009, our unreserved, undesignated fund balance to come in at $10.8 million, or 17.5% of the 2010 budget. Once again, this is compared to 8.7 or 13.5% as June 30th, 2008. This puts us slightly over our 10 to 17% policy directive. And once again, this, that overage over 17% is roughly around $300,000. Fund balance, the amount applied to revenues, once again, 2009-10 designated fund balance for budget purposes is zero, compared to $4.1 million in the 2008-9 budget. The 2009-10 unreserved, undesignated, again, is at roughly estimated 10.8 or 17.5% of general fund. Gone through that pretty quick. If there's any, we can take, after I get a water break, we can take any questions on the revenue side if we want to now. Then after the break, we'll get into some of the expenditure side of the general fund.
Okay, folks have questions on the revenue side? I saw a lot of people making a lot of notes, but I don't know if they have questions to go with those. Give them a minute to find their thing. Would you run over one more time the comment you made at the beginning about the taxable value will continue to decrease? Is it in the next 5 years?
Right.
By how much?
I have a slide at the end of the general fund
Okay.
presentation, which will kind of go over 5-year projections on the revenues
Okay.
and expenditures,
All right,
and let you know where we think we're going to head, where we're headed.
okay, all right, thank you. Anybody else have a question? No? You want to take a break then and
How- I-
come
we
back?
can
You
keep
want to
rolling.
just continue?
I'm okay. We
Keep
got through
going.
this a little bit.
All right, okay. Right here.
Hands going at this way. Key trends and issues. We'll take in the general fund. We'll look at the expenditure side now.
This diet.
We provide a summary by department, by budgetary center by object, a history by department, and a summary by account. And the budget document provides many schedules at various levels of detail, from summaries by department to summaries by every account. General fund budget of $62 million equates to $771 spent per resident based on SEMCOG's estimated population of 80,455. Our planning department has a slightly higher number, and I think we're somewhere in between both of those numbers probably. But we are coming up, 2010 is a census year, and it's very important to get a very good count on our population for state shared revenue, for road money, for everything. So hopefully we'll be well accounted for and see where our numbers end up after that, because we'll be stuck with those numbers for 10 years. Just taking a quick look at the $62 million again, we have the police department, $25.2 million, or $313 per resident. Parks and Recreation, $8.8 million, $109 per resident. Streets and Drains, this is for maintenance, $5.7 million, $71 per resident. The Fire Department, $4.5 million, $56 per resident. Library and Museum, $4.2 million, or $52 per resident. Council Executive Administration, $3.7 million, or $46 per resident. The Finance and Administrative Departments, $3.2 million, or $40 per resident. Engineering, $2.4 million, or $30 per resident. Other General Government Operations, $2.3 million, or $29, and Building Inspection, $2 million, or $25 per resident. A recap on the general fund expenditures. We've had an original department request that came in at about $63.9 million. We had to make adjustments of $1.9 million to get us to that $62 million and balanced budget, which is a 3.7% overall reduction. Once again, to make up that difference, part of that management adjustments were the layoffs, were a little over $727,000 in savings. Some of the other reduction areas: police department operations, street department, snow and ice control, street department operations, library operations, and city hall operations. Also were some of the major areas that we also had some management reductions to get us to this balanced budget. And during our presentation and reviewing of this document at our meeting, we had snow and ice control. How could we reduce that $230,000? But it's such a wide. I went back and looked at our last 5 years, and we were anywhere from $780,000 for snow and ice removal for the entire winter, for the entire season, to $1.7 million. The current year's budget for 2010, we have $1.4 million that we've slated. That's a reduction from what the request was. But in just a couple years' times, who would think that 2007 was our lowest year? 781,000. The next year, 2008, was our highest year of almost $1 million increase in that. So that's where we stand right now, and we've backed down some of those numbers. Looking at a 5-year, we're still at towards the upper end of that. But if we have a mild winter, we'll be okay. If we have a really rough winter, we'll be a little behind in that area.
John, just for a point of information, this past 2 years in running for snow in southeast Michigan, we had 137 inches of snow. That's the highest 2-year back-to-back amount in the history of southeast Michigan. Back in 1918 and 1919, it was 126 inches for a 2-year back-to-back. So that supports some of the information you're giving as far as, documenting these peak years and snow and ice control in the southeast.
It just depends on the winter. We're trying to take our best educated guess here, but we'll see what happens. Mother Nature does what it wants to do. So, but other expenditure highlights. Once again, the expenditures reflect city priorities. General fund operating budget is down 3.7%. Salary adjustments per union contracts, with the exception of AFSCME union and classified and exempt employees, are included in the budget, and we had a reduction of 24 full-time positions. The AFSCME union came forward with a one-year extension of their current contract, existing contract, with no wage adjustment. The classified and exempt group, due to layoffs and so forth, are presenting also no increase for next year's in their wages. The TPOA contract expired 6/30/08, and we're currently in negotiations with that group. The fire group contract expires at the end of this fiscal year. And the other union contracts have scheduled wage adjustments that are incorporated in the budget anywhere from 2 to 3%. Looking at the expenditures by object, we have three main objects: personal services, supplies, other services and charges, which are summarized, all the various accounts and line items. Personal services went down almost $1.5 million, or 3.2% reduction in personal services, mainly through the attritions and some layoffs. Supplies are down $343,000, or 11.2%, and other services and charges are down $577,000, or 3.6%. Once again, for an overall $2.4 million reduction in the general fund, or 3.7%. General fund expenditure by objects: personal services are 71% of the budget, supplies make up 4%, and other service and charges are 25%. As far as our collective bargaining agreements go, we now have 6 union groups. The communication supervisors have elected to join a union just recently. Current negotiations with TPOA. We are currently in negotiations with TPOA, and we'll be starting shortly with the fire group and the communication supervisors. We're continuing to use the IBB method with all union groups and hope to use it also with the new communication supervisors group. As far as general fund supplies, just to get a little breakdown of that, once again, it's down about $344,000, 11.2%. Office supplies went down 5.2%. We really are seeing a reduction in our paper usage. We're going a lot more electronic and submittals. We also put some office supply restrictions in place, and we've lowered our office supply usage from 181,000 in 2004 to 124,000 in 2008. Postage is down about 34,000, or 17.2%. Once again, a reduction of the calendar mailing, and one issue of Troy Today makes up most of that reduction. And also, we're finding that doing a lot more electronic notification of bids and so forth, and avoiding the whole mailing process altogether. Operating supplies are down almost $390,000, or 24%. A lot of that's related to the tree planting programs, which are basically over with now, and our tree replacement programs. Other service and charges down $577,000, or 3.6%. Computer services are down about $182,000. A couple reasons there. We have 22 fewer computers. Some of that in relation to reduction in staff. Some of it also with the community center and the reduction of some of the computers there, which are now people are using at the library, and so forth. And also the library is just continuing with their co-op program and bringing it in-house, and we're saving quite a bit of money there. Community promotion, $19,000, 27.3%, basically is the appreciation banquet. It's been reduced out of the budget. Printing and publishing, $30,000 reduction, or almost 10%. Basically the calendar and one issue of Troy Today. Public utilities, down $220,000, or 8.1%. Some of it's related to energy conservation efforts, and even more so with the new That's why we don't have any air today in the side of the building. But the new unit will be a lot more energy efficient. We're projecting a lot of savings there, and also fine-tuning the whole overall budgets for our utilities. We're seeing a reduction, and that we didn't have as big of an increase in the current year as we thought we'd have from last year. Other fees, $220,000 or 69%. Once again, that's related to our local tree maintenance and our planting program that's been reduced. Community group contributions. We've had discussions on our support of the community groups during our preliminary budget hearings, and it was, I think, pretty much agreed to maintain the funding. The only change there is that the Tri-Medico is about a $10,000 increase in that, because that's strictly a pass-through of our SMART money that we receive for that service. So we're anticipating getting a little over $180,000 for that, and that's a strict pass-through. Everything else at this point has remained the same, and we are contributing almost $400,000 for community group contributions. The various groups that are listed there. Gary, get that one. We have the Recreation Division Challenge, and that is, no, the other one, the yellow, the highlighted one, yep. And I'll go over this, but I have some background information on how we got to those numbers as a substantiation of it. I've summarized those numbers here on the chart. But 2002 subsidy was $1,705,000 plus our existing community center subsidy of $1 million, total $2,705,000. And the resolution at the time was that was $2,705,000 was to remain the same for subsequent years. That was our undertaking. That was a city council directive. And going back to the last several years, Recreation has done a very good job in not using anywhere near that subsidy, basically. But this current year, with fee increases and so forth, they need about $1.9 million out of the $2.7. So there's about $801,000 subsidy gap there. Breakdown there gives you the various numbers that tie into these numbers in detail. But in our current year's budget, there's a subsidy savings of $801,000. Second challenge was for the community center, and that was part of the overall $2.7 million, but $1 million subsidy for the community center. We went from as you may recall, from a 23,000 square foot facility to a 127,000 square foot facility. As part of that whole program, we said, well, we only want you to have the $1 million that you received back when you had the smaller facility. Well, you could see that they've consistently been a subsidy saving of over $600,000 the last several years. In the current year's budget, they're going to need about $345,000 of the $1 million for subsidy savings of about $655,000. And once again, as pointed out in the budget document and so forth, we have over 1 million visits a year at the community center. Now we get into the 5-year taxable valuations and projections. And, got, once again, 3 summary slides, but this is a little bit more background. This is how we developed our estimates here, and a detailed breakdown of revenue and expenditures, how we got to the numbers that we'll be presenting here. Okay, I'd like to just take a few minutes and go over, taking a look at our taxable value projections, our net city taxable value over the next 5 years. starting, this year we're looking at from 2011 through 2015. And this is basically what lies ahead of us. The taxable value is projected to continue downward at least through 2015. Next year, we're looking at a 4.5% reduction. 2012, about a 6.3% reduction. 2013, another 5.4% reduction. And these are kind of, I think the numbers are in your charts, or in the information we gave you too, but if you want to. And then 2014, 4.1%, and then 2015, about 3.44%.
Where did this come from?
The city assessor. This is, unfortunately, this could be the good news, maybe the more positive, hopefully a positive outcome here, projections, because our taxable value can drop even more if foreclosures play a greater role in our home sales. Once we have a subdivision that has over 50% of the sales for that year in foreclosures, you have to then use that foreclosed rate is considered a market value rate for that area. Right now we're dangerously close in several areas that we're under the 50%, but once you reach over 50%, you then have to take that into consideration when you value that whole subdivision and its properties. So these numbers here, they could be a little worse if we hit some subdivisions that get into that 50% range. But this is, we feel, a number to work with at this point, looking out 5 years, basically almost 6 years looking out, next year plus 5 years beyond that. But we think that this is a pretty realistic view of what our taxable values will be for the city. Revenue and expenditure projections using the taxable value projections and modest increases in the other sources of revenue. The blue line, actually it's the black line with the blue little diamond there, shows you what will happen to the revenue. It'll continuously go down starting 2011. The red line reflects the effect of a 2.5% increase per year in expenditures. And the green line, the green diamond and the blue line, is a 2% increase in expenditures over the next 5 years. So depending on where our expenditures come in at, if you're looking anywhere from 2 to 2.5, we held the line and actually had a reduction this year. But that's looking at, with everything else in place, a 2.5 or 2% increase. That's what we're looking at. The next slide gives you the numbers for 2011 budget. Looking at if it's a 2.5% increase in expenditures, a 2.9% deficit. If it's 2%, you're looking at a $2.6 million deficit. And so on 2012, you're looking at 7.3 versus 6.7 million. Deficit 2013 anywhere from 10.2 to 9.2, 2014 12.8 to 11.5, 2015 15.1 to 13.4. We wanted to get you this information tonight just to keep in mind, but I think our main focus right now is to adopt our next year's budget. And after this budget is adopted, then we will begin to tackle and develop plans for the future years. But this year we've taken major steps with not using any fund balance, with doing some major changes and so forth, and in place, starting to get some of those in place. And we're at a point now where we do have a balanced budget for this next year. But we do have some serious budget issues coming up the next 5 years until things turn around in the marketplace. And we don't think it's going to be until 2015 or so before we see our market value at least reducing or getting back to there's no reduction. So that's what I have right now. Any questions on the general fund at this point? Revenues, expenditures, whatever.
Christina?
Just what you just said, Mr. Lamarose, I looked at
that 5-year projection, it's pretty wide. It continually grows wider. And the hope is at some point it starts turning around and we're only looking out 5 years because how far out do you want to go? But it's not going this way and this way in the next 5 years. What I'm seeing on the projection is this. So even if it starts turning around, it's still, we've still got to deal with that 6, 7, and 8 years.
Next year, or the 2010-11 budget is probably fairly manageable with a $2.5, $2.6 million. I think we could probably come up and try to get that. But from that point on, it's going to be very difficult after that. When you get into the $5 million, then more.
One follow-up question on Big Mike. You said that our city assessor is the one that came up with these projections. And, the assumption is he's basing it on some kind of national data that's being all collected and bringing that down to Troy?
No, he's basing it basically on our local conditions and Oakland County and our local conditions here, and what we're looking at, and how he sees the movement of the number of properties that are getting closer to the assessed value, the taxable value to assessed value.
Right.
And as long as you have, and based on projected home sales and the value of those homes are selling, but they're selling for a lot less than what their assessed value is, and they'll start to eventually affect our revenue. And up until this year, we had room between our taxable value and assessed value. But now, you see, this is the first time we had a reduction in our overall taxable value of the city. So that's $70 million for just our purpose, and over $100 million overall for the whole city. But it's based on our projection, what he sees happening in our current marketplace and in Troy. And he has to look at Troy and where we are and where our properties are in relation to assessed value and taxable value, and what home sales are going for. And it's an estimate of what he thinks is going to happen in the next several years. It's an estimate, but I think it's pretty close. He said for me to sit down when I got the numbers, and I'm glad I was sitting down. But it was.
Donna?
You worded that, John, as revenue, but it's just tax revenue. It doesn't include revenue sharing and those kinds of things.
That's built in there.
Is it? That's
Yeah.
what I wanted
There's
to know.
in the backup charts that I gave you, you could see by each major revenue source.
Okay.
There is a projected, some charges for services, I think we had like a 1 or 2% increase each year over those years. State revenue basically stayed the same or lower, a little bit lower. And then interest rates, we figured that interest rates are probably going to change in a couple years, so we had a little build up there. So we took a look at all the major revenue sources, and we projected each one of those out 5 years.
That's a little better because I was calculating.
No, it's everything. No, it's
I
all.
was calculating in my head that we've
Of course,
already lost
the major piece is the
taxes.
It's
Yeah,
a major
absolutely.
portion of our revenue. So.
Well, and that's really the only
But we
one
did
we
take a
have
look
to
at
do.
all, and those estimates were mine on the revenues and expenditures. Now, is 2% or 2.5% high in expenditures? We'll have to wait and see. But it's going to be hard to keep coming in under and under and under in reductions too. So
I have another couple questions. On page 48, you show the $230,000 for snow and ice control reduction, and on page 222 of the budget, it says that snow removal and plowing, we're only going to do that 3 times. We're going to control the rest of it with. So would you please explain that? Because I can't believe we're only going to plow 3 times.
that's local subdivisions. We're anticipating 3 major storm events that would require plowing of all the local subdivisions.
Of all the subdivision
Right.
roads, all 360 or whatever, however many roads. Okay, that makes way more sense to me than. The computer reduction in computer services, $180, almost $2,000. You said that we're down 22 computers. Is that a net decrease that also takes into effect the increase in building computers?
There is a net decrease of 22 overall.
All right, that's what I needed. Thank
Overall
you.
computers that are charged out and paid for.
Okay,
Mary?
thanks.
You described the perfect storm when you went 5 years out, and I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the other municipalities and the other government units that are facing these same kinds of forecasts. We're okay now, we have our head above water, this is a good budget going forward, but looking out. Could you speak to that? Could you address that?
Other cities, every city in the state of Michigan is in trouble, and they're faced with similar hit on their housing stock and their values and so forth, and those that are more residential than we are even more trouble than we are. So, but I think you're going to see a lot of them are using fund balance. A lot of them are depleting their fund balance and are going to have to probably go to a vote of the people for more millage or whatever. It's not the best time to be doing that either at this right now. But Sterling Heights, for example, and I've watched their hearings and so forth, and they're using over $4 million to balance their next year budget. They're basically at the end of the rope there. They're going to have to, they have leeway in their millage rate, and they're going to have to increase next year, following year. But they're looking at over, I think they're looking similar to what we have, and over 20% reduction in taxable value over the next 5 years too. They're fairly similar to what we have. They're very close to our taxable value, and their makeup's a little different. They have more residential than we do, but they're, with all the plants and everything they have there too, though, all the automotive plants, they could be in deep, Chrysler or whatever else, I mean, they're going to be in deep trouble, Sterling Heights. So. But I think all cities are faced with this state share revenue. Who knows what's going to happen with that? The state's not in good shape. Interest rates are low. State shared revenue is not going up. If anything, hopefully we can maintain. Up to this point, they maintain, but when the state gets their final numbers on how far they're in deficit, I don't see how they can avoid not doing something and some reduction there. We have in state shared revenue, we have about a little over 1 million of our 6.6 million, the statutory, which they could do something with. We're kind of protected on $5 million of that, or $5 million is through constitutional, so they can't really do anything with that. But we have a $1.1 million exposure there. I don't think hopefully won't go that route, but we plan for a small, like $50,000 reduction, which may or may not be enough.
Do you anticipate a similar session then with council where we prioritize items we went through in order to cut back?
I think we're going to have to.
Helpful? I mean, we're actually doing budgetary things year round. I mean, you folks always do, but we as a council have been working on it the past year. Do you think that we're going to have to do that continually?
Well, yeah, we're going to have to continue. We're going to have to continue on, and I'll call it some version of budgeting for outcomes, or whatever. But it's going to be. I think what you have is that if you look at all the outcomes and the outputs and outcomes and so forth, that if you look at all of them and where their ratings, primary and basic and so forth, there's some overlapping in some of those areas there. So I think we have to refine that a little bit more, and then look at the outputs again. And we're probably going to have to start ticking off some of those basic services. That's the only way we're going to be able. I mean, we've reduced our staff to a point where I think we're going to have to start looking at services that may need to be reduced.
Okay, and that leads me to my next question. Could we have some kind of a survey of the citizenry that would go out in Troy Today or go out in the water bill or something that would ask folks to prioritize and send them back in so we could get some data from the community? Would that be something that we can look at? Don?
We can do whatever the governing body wishes, but my experience tells me that when you seek a blanket opinion from the populace, it's not statistically significant. In other words, you'd have to probably hire a company to do a significant sampling of sentiments. That way it becomes more accurate than having someone fill out a card and sending it back in. And that would be an excellent idea. I think if you would go that route, to actually hire a firm that specializes in taking polls to get a pulse on what the community wants, as opposed to sending out postcards or something to that effect. It's a good idea.
Because that way, we can alert people and say, you know, we're asking you for this, the input, so that when we sit down to prioritize, we have heard from people. Because we all hear from groups and we hear from, you know, our circles that we go in. But I think doing it in general of the general population, because folks are realizing that everyone's having to cut back. But at least that way we could get some data that would be hard data.
I think what has salience as well is the manner in which the questions are framed
Right.
to the residents, and the governing body would have to have buy-in to what questions were asked and how they were put.
Okay.
You have an outside objective firm do the information and come back and say, here's what is important to the populace.
I was trying to think of a tool. You know, we have some building projects that we've been talking about for 5 years that, you know, if this comes, it'll help with our budgets, you know. But then the economy tanked and we didn't get those. So, you know, we can't count on that. So in order to get data that is accurate about what the citizenry would look at, I think it would be good to use some kind of tool.
John, Brian, you know this more than I, but I think ICMA, I know they do a citizen survey. I don't know if it could be tailored to have a survey on services per se. We also in the past used someone whose name I forgot, that did a number of surveys for us. I believe when the bond issue in 1999 was issued, an outside firm was utilized to give the sense of if the city wanted to go that way.
Right. Yeah. Mary, now I'm going to take your question over here.
And I did just forward to you the SEMCOG sample
Right,
survey, which a lot of governance units are using to look at data to results. What does this number say? What seems to be the interest? And that is quite affordable and is statistically significant. So I would suggest that as a possible
Right.
tool. Thank you.
Mark and David, do you have questions at this point on the second?
I have one on slide 57. We had the $1 million subsidy still listed. I thought when we had our study session, we had come to a consensus to not list it as the full amount in the future. We had originally established this number in a study session, and I thought that had been communicated. Which number? We didn't say we were going to eliminate the subsidy 100%. We weren't just going to say, you've got $1 million. It's
I don't know if that was
650,000 or.
I don't think that was a resolution from council. This is a resolution from council here, the million. Yes, it was a resolution. And I don't believe there was a resolution since then that lowered that amount to anything. There may have been some discussions in saying that, but I don't recall any resolution saying that it should be less than $1 million.
Okay, because Phil had distributed to us the discussion from the study session that was set. I think we need to look at that again, because I don't think any department in the city gets a set amount given these outcomes that we have, that we're, the financial situation that we're looking at. For anyone to say that you've got a fixed amount, it's very difficult for me.
Christiane? Yes.
As a saddleback that, we may want to look at the last few years of what the community center has actually used of that monies, and then based on that, as a council, look at, rather than just blanket $1 million, is, you know what, in the last 5 years, you average X number of dollars usage.
There was the chart that showed the amount that was down, but I think what I'm saying, we didn't have an actual resolution, but we could research to
That
see
would
if
be
we had
something,
one, but
yeah.
it could be
And
something.
find
we
an
could talk
average,
about.
find out what are they doing, they're doing a great job not using
Right.
it all. But since it is there to use, it might.
John?
I'm having a hard time with the fan hearing everything, so
Okay.
please forgive me. But what would you want for this budget? What would the governing body want for this budget? in terms
On that
of-
particular item?
345, 200.
Just like it's presented.
345, 200, but not saying that you've got $1 million that's designated for you. Our goal is
To
to
lower
provide
the
the
amount.
service cost effectively as possible as we list in our goals for the budget. Listing $1 million subsidy potential seems to be contrary to our budgeting process. We don't do it anywhere else.
Well, I know, but that's, in there is a resolution out there that states that, so that's why we use it. And I could see that, it could be cut, or it could be reduced, or whatever, and I give my hat off to Carol Anderson and her group for coming in, knowing you have $1 million subsidy to come in, 600,000 under that for the last 4 years, deserves an applause.
Yeah.
Right.
So, whatever you want to make that number, if there's a consensus on council to make that number, whatever, 500,000 or 600,000 or whatever you want to do, but
No number.
What have we done with
basically it's now currently it's a non-factor because they're coming in 600,000 under under the resolution that's out there that says you have $1 million. So,
May I?
If I may,
Yes.
that $1 million doesn't actually show up as a line item in the budget.
no.
Right.
It's a benchmark
Right.
that we shoot for. It's much like a performance measure. Right? So what you're looking at is changing that performance measure. It
Right.
doesn't actually show up as a line item in the budget.
May I? Is that on the same one?
It is, well, it's for Park and Rec, and I know that you mentioned, John, that the trees, because the trees are in, and as spring comes and some of the trees look sorry, I just wonder if there is a replacement program, or is there an aim for that, or did we plant the trees to replace the ash, and I'm just curious
The
about that.
major tree replacement program is complete. And that's all the subdivision and replacement of the trees. With this year, everything will be complete. This current year. That basically was a 5-year program or so that we spent a couple million every year to get
Right.
back by removing and new plantings and so forth. And something we'll have to look at in the future, since we're basically done with the residential street replanting, is that most cities charge when you have a tree planted in your front yard, and we do not charge for that. So that's something that definitely will be looked at the next time we do a major tree replanting program. That'll come back to council at that time. We'll establish a fee to have a tree planted in your front yard.
The
Well, it's
county,
actually in the right of way.
Right.
the county has a program like that, offers trees for a reduced price.
Right. A lot of cities, most cities have a price associated with it. Sterling Heights, I know, has same thing with the ash removal and so forth, but you had to pay $150 or $200 for whatever size tree you wanted to get in front of your house. So if you wanted a tree back out in front of your house.
So in terms of a resident now discovers that the tree is not viable, won't make it, is there something that's done?
I'll talk to Carol.
At this point, for this next budget year, we will remove trees that are more than compliant, trees that are not viable or are dead, but we will not replace them for the next budget year. With the intended that we are done with the major tree replacements for the ash trees, but there's always a percentage of trees that don't make it. And after this budget year, we would propose to budget some money for some replacements, but not nearly on the scale that we've been doing for the last 5 years.
Did we have a guarantee?
We do. We still are in the warranty period for some of the trees, and so I should say that you may see some replacements in this budget year, but that would be as trees that are warranted. Thank you for that.
For anyone that's watching,
Wade,
call Parks and Rec for that, right?
yeah,
Right.
right. Wade, did you have a?
That was my point, because I understood that the trees that we were planting were under warranty, and
Right.
if they didn't make it and they looked sad, they could be replaced. So you answered that question.
Yeah.
There are
And
still
those
some
are
under
trees-
warranty.
Typically, there's a 1-year warranty, so those trees that were placed 2 or 3 years ago no longer in warranty. Yeah.
Okay.
You folks want to take a break before we go to the next section?
It's really hot.
All right.
Be good.
Oh, you kidding?
Mr. Navarado?
Okay. Any other questions on the general fund, or move on to the special revenue?
Nope. Anybody? Okay. Yes, Christina, you got a question?
I have just some thoughts and questions at the tail end. I can do that. It doesn't have to be broke up by
Right.
falls
No.
in this section or that
No.
section. Okay, I didn't think so. Because it wasn't brought up in this.
All right, the next series of funds we'll look at are the special revenue funds. These account for specific revenues that are legally restricted to expenditures for particular purposes. We have our Community Development Block Grant, the Community Fair, Local Street, Major Street, Budget Stabilization, and Refuse and Recycling. We have a Community Development Block Grant. We have $158,000 roughly in federal grants. City Council's already held a public hearing on this and allocated the funds according to how it's laid out here. That has pretty much been set up for us at this point. Community Fair Fund. Last fall, Troy Days Fair was a washout, as you may recall. They recorded a loss of approximately $60,000 for that fair, for the last year's fair. For fall 2009, the fair is projected to, at this point, their budget is to break even. Local street fund, we have gas and weight and tax and the license fees help fund the maintenance of local streets based on a formula of miles per roads and population. This revenue source has been flat or has slightly decreased for the last couple of years. The funding for our local roads, the state funding no longer covers the maintenance and snow removal cost of our local streets. The Major Street Fund and fund balance is necessary to help cover the cost just for the local road maintenance. And as long as the gas tax that's redistributed back to cities, as long as that is set as a certain amount per gallon of gas, this source of revenue is going to continue to decrease. Each year it comes up, and each year they either sunset it for another year or so, but they have to take a close look at that. And with more fuel-efficient cars and with the price of gasoline, less gas that is being purchased or used means less revenue for us. We're not a percentage of sales. We're based a certain dollar amount per gallon of gas you sold. So that works against us. For local streets, we spend about $1.8 million for maintenance. It includes snow removal, signage, sweeping, patching, marking, and so forth, the routine maintenance of our local streets. Major Street Fund, $3.3 million, also funded by the gas and weight tax and license fees. They transfer all the activities recorded in the general fund, so this money is then transferred from the major streets to the general fund. They transfer $2.2 million to the general fund for the maintenance, snow removal, signage, sweeping, and so forth, routine maintenance of all major roads in the city. They transfer $150,000 to local streets funds, and they contribute $1 million to the capital fund to help for the reconstruction of major roads. Budget Stabilization Fund was established in 2003. After the transfer of $250,000 to the general fund, we'll have a balance of $1,850,000 in that fund. The interest earnings are also transferred each year to the general fund, as the state law requires. Refuse and Recycling Fund. Once again, 2008, there's 15.15 mils, reduced from that current millage rate from 0.83 to 0.68 mils. We are going to need 0.75 mils for next year's budget in order to cover the expenses. That's mainly due to the cost of service and also the drop, make up for that drop in taxable value. And even with that .07 mils adjustment, we're using $150,000 of their fund balance to balance out next year's budget. So to maintain the same overall tax rate again of 9.28 mils, we've transferred .07 mils from the capital projects fund to the refuse fund. The average residential homeowner pays $90 a year for refuse and recycling collection. That's quite a deal. Take a look at what happened to the fund balance in the refuse and recycling fund. June 30, 2008, we had $542,465 in a fund balance. For the current year, revenues, we're estimating $3,615,000, expenditures $3,995,000 roughly, and an ending fund balance of around $162,000. 2009-10, with a 7-cent tax rate adjustment, generate just under $4 million in revenues. Expenditures are a little over $4 million, and these revenues under expenditures by $150,000, which has to come from fund balance, which leaves only about $13,000 left in the fund balance. This is dangerously close. It's a fund that is governed by the state of Michigan and is a write-up, basically, if you have a deficit in this fund. And we can't do much about this fund because the only really revenue source we have is the taxes, and some interest earnings in that fund, basically. So even with the .07 mils, it's dangerously close to running into a deficit situation. Once again, the .07 mils for the average homeowner is $8.40, and .07 mils on the total taxable value of the city is worth about $360,000 in our current taxable value. Any questions on any of the special revenue funds? Move then to the internal service funds. Internal service funds are used to account for the financing of goods and services provided by one department to other departments on a cost reimbursement basis. We have these 6 funds set up: building operations, information technology, fleet maintenance, compensated absences, unemployment insurance, and workers' compensation. Building Operations Fund provides building maintenance services to all city buildings. There's a large reduction in this budget because we are now directly charging a janitorial cost to each of the various buildings in those departments instead of charging here, then redistributing out the cost. So this strictly is just the building maintenance operations for all facilities. Departments are expenditures are incurred on a square footage basis, and our cost per square foot to service all the buildings is $2.29, which is very low compared to anything out there benchmark. Information Technology Fund, the revenues generated by charges to departments based on the number of computers assigned to their department. They service approximately 566 workstations or laptops. And the charge per computer covers the support, training, replacement, and any software upgrades and so forth to the systems. We're able to hold the cost per computer to this without any increase this year due to the extended life of computers and also going from a 3 to 4 year replacement program to a 4 to 5 year replacement program. You're not seeing as much as you did in the 90s and the early 2000s of just the continuous upgrade in speed and everything else in the computers that you had back then. And we are replacing them on a little bit longer replacement schedule. As far as their capital expenses, they have $215,000 budgeted, $185,000 for a Hanson upgrade. And this is, we have a write-up on this upgrade or replacement of that system. We purchased it back in 2003, and they've released a major upgrade to that system. But while we're looking at that, we're also looking at other systems that are out there to see if what would be the best fit for us. The Hanson right now provides our customer service, asset management, and our utility billing, basically handled through the Hanson system. So this will either be $185,000 for some upgrades or $185,000 towards accumulating some funds for some major changes in that whole area. Maybe a 2-year program or so, or we're looking at maybe $350,000 or so to change over to possibly a new system. But our IT department's evaluating not only Hanson and the upgrades that they come out with, but also what else is out there. New World system has a lot of the same programs that our main financial software package also. And there's $30,000 in it for New World. That's some last few financial modules, mainly dealing with the human resources. It's consulting services with that. Fleet maintenance fund, rental charges for city-owned vehicles and equipment to all departments, generates its revenue for operations and capital replacement, plus outside governmental customers that they do have. Clausen, Troy Schools, even with the new bus contract or so forth, they still do a lot of work for Troy Schools or other vehicles. Medigo, Sacra, Birmingham, some other cities also. Overall rate increase was 2%, but this was basically offset by a reduction in chargeable vehicles and also offset by some of the outside work that the revenue that we get for that. The rental rate covers the maintenance, fuel, insurance, and replacement costs for the vehicles and equipment. Compensated absences fund accounts for our sick and vacation accruals. It's a separate fund to account for all those liabilities so that none of our operating funds have to record those liabilities as they accrue per employee. See, that's starting to go down a little bit also with the reduction in staffing and so forth. Employment insurance, that's unfortunately going up a little bit, but we're a member of the Michigan Municipal League self-insurance pool, and it's still a great deal. We have wages of all full and part-time people of over almost $34.7 million in wages, and we pay roughly $156,000 for insurance. Workers' compensation, we're also with the Michigan Municipal League and self-insured pool. Our modification factor went up a little bit, from 0.65 to 0.73 for this current year coming up, but it's still a very good deal at $387,000 based on the payroll that we do have here and the operations that we perform. Any questions on the internal service ones?
On the compensated absences fund, how much of that is that combines all the union workers and the non-union workers?
It's everyone, all employees, all full-time employees who earn vacation or sick time.
Is this an amount that's like 1 year, or is this saved up for people who have accrued comp time, or is this?
This is on an annual basis for sick time and vacation accruals that are accrued each year.
This is only 1 year.
1 year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So on page 76, the IT information, Hanson upgrade, you said that either upgrades or perhaps a 2-year program, you're just kind of looking at that. Is that replacing computers or just the programming?
Mainly the software, and program software and consulting and implementation work
Okay.
for that.
And that'll be the, you just got that in there to, as you
Right.
go through and make the decisions and analyze and all of that.
Right. We'll have to come back to council, whatever we do, but
Right.
we're right now, and there's you'll get a, next week with the capital budget, you'll get more of a write-up on it, but basically a condensed version is that we're looking at, Hanson came out with a major upgrade, which we're going to evaluate.
Okay.
And also at the same time, we want to look at some New World and some other products that are out there to provide a similar type service and see what those are like.
Okay.
So it may be a 1 or 2 year program, but this is initial funding for whatever we end up doing. But we'll come back to council with that when we're ready to move forward on that.
David?
Thank you. I remember we had some extra people to help with the transition to the New World system. Was that an outside consultant, or is that the part-time people reflected?
That would be part-time staff that's in the IT department.
Okay. Because I see the application support specialist is continuing. Would that be?
Yep. That's a position we've had, but they're mainly dedicated towards our software upgrades and improvements and so forth. But.
Okay.
I have a question about our saving money on insurance costs. Do you want me to do it now, or?
That's fine. What type of
What
insurance?
did we decide we were going to do about groups? You know how we used to, if groups are using a city facility, they're covered under city insurance, they have to get their own insurance?
Well, it
Now,
depends.
what's the status on that?
It depends. If it's a normal governmental activity that cities would put on and so forth, then they would be covered under our liability insurance.
Right.
But if it's something over and above that, then we do require to have insurance in place
Okay.
based on whatever risk management comes up.
We didn't change that from
No.
previous times.
So,
I had some citizens ask me about that with regard to some kind of a program, and I said, of course, I directed the staff to talk about it, because I didn't think we had changed anything with regarding our insurance coverage.
no.
Okay, thank you. Any other
Question?
questions on this section?
Okay, the next section will cover our debt service funds. We have a proposed tax rate again of 0.50 mils. We'll look at the debt service fund, general debt service fund, our transportation fund, proposal A, B, and C, and schedules of principal and interest and so forth. Debt service fund, about $3.1 million to service our proposal A, B, and C debt. It's basically all generated through our 0.50 mils and some interest earnings, and also some fund balance here to balance that out. The 2000 Michigan Transportation Fund bond is for the Rochester and Big Beaver Road intersection. That is funded by the Downtown Development Authority. They transfer money in to cover that. We have a little over $1,225,000 outstanding on that debt, and that will be paid off in 2014. Proposal A for the street bonds. The original issue amount was $11 million. We need about a little over $800,000 this year to pay for our principal and interest due on those bonds. We have $8,585,000 still outstanding going into the year, and there's a final maturity on those of 2021. Proposal B, bonds are for the public safety bonds, totaling $18 million. The original issue amount is for our Fire Police Training Center, Police and Fire Administrative Wing, Fire Station number 3. Of the $18 million, we have $13,370,000 still outstanding. Once again, the final maturity is 2021. Proposal C bonds for recreational facilities. The original issue amount was $18 million. We had $12 million for the community center and $6 million for parkland acquisition. of the 18 million, we have 7,095,000 still outstanding. Once again, the final maturity is 2021, and we need about 771,000 to cover those payments. Looking at our projected millage rate requirements for the general debt fund, appears that we'll be able to hold the 0.50 mils. When we initially issued these bonds, we were at 0.75 mils. We said we would never go over 0.75. At the time, when we went from 0.75 to 0.5, because of the funding situation we had, that money went to the capital fund and was transferred from debt to capital at 0.25 mils. If it's ever needed to cover any of our debt service down the road here, where you could see possibly 2016 or so, we may need to raise that up a little bit. That would then come from the capital fund. But we would not go over the 0.75 mils that we had slated for that. Of course, the taxable value decrease is putting more pressure on that fund.
What causes the change in 2016? Because isn't it a fixed interest rate?
It's a fixed interest rate, but it's, well, no, it's not fixed. Each bond has its own rate each year. There's a different amount. This was, what changes it is, you have to look at the fund balance. There's many parts of the fund balance in the fund, and also the taxable value adjustment each year in the fund. Using this schedule here, we had a 0.5% increase in taxable value. Well, this year we had a 1.3% reduction. So we still think we could still handle it out there till 15 or 16 before there's going to be some kind of a rate adjustment needed. It may be a little sooner than that, depending if we have a number of more years, which looks like we're going to have. We may have to move that up a little closer. But right now, we do have fund balance in there also to kind of cover, which was meant to be to cover these swings, try to keep it as level. We don't want to be going up 50 cents and down up to 75 and down back to 50, and up to 60 and down to 50. We want to try to hold it 50 as long as we can, knowing that we have up to 0.75 mils to cover it. But it's a combination of fund balance, taxable value increases each year, and actual principal and interest payments that are due each year, which does fluctuate. Sometimes it may be more principal paid one year than the next or whatever. It's a combination of all that. Any questions on debt service funds?
Do you want to take general questions now? Christina said she had some at the end. And if there are things that go with what we're going to talk about next Monday, he'll tell us and then we'll go.
John, I was just looking through things and was making some notes, and what I wanted to do is see if, when we meet again, if we could have some numbers of what certain things are costing us. It's very hard to be eyeballing here. One of them would be the, you know, we have car allowances for some of our department heads, and we also have, we do the longevity payments as well.
Right. For some.
Yeah, for some. And you know what I want to do? I just want to know what that is. The numbers,
For
the
car
allowances
allowances,
and the longevity.
for all
payments.
staff, or for
The car allowances for all staff.
longevity for everyone?
Yeah, but if we could separate that out with our, our exempt and classified, what their longevity payments are currently, and then what our union, the others are, because we've got these contracts coming up too, but I would just like to
Right.
see those separate. what
Yeah,
we're
we
doing.
do have, just for a point, just of information that longevity no longer is offered or
We still currently have the
for new
ones.
hires, but we do have people that have at
Yes.
certain stages, longer term employees that, probably anybody that has, let me see, since I was the first one who didn't get longevity, anybody that's over 15 years of service.
And it may not even be a big number, but if we could see, or I'd like
Yeah,
to see that
that's
number,
fine.
if that's.
It's gone down
okay.
dramatically last year, but.
And
For
then,
clarification, if I may, you also want to know who has a car in lieu of a car allowance?
yes,
Okay. Doesn't cost.
And
a lot.
separate that out.
Well, okay.
and then the other, I know that we have some contractors that we use that are on retainers. You know, maybe it's somebody outside of the people that we have here. For instance, for a city attorney's office, we have an outside city attorney that we can go to, and he's on a retainer. Right?
I don't know, ask Gloria, I don't think so.
Are you talking Craig Lang or Lang?
Yeah, I thought we did.
Well, retainer, I don't know that we have
I
retainer.
think they're on retainer though. Laurie?
Obviously, I would defer to Ms. Sears for to the extent that you're asking for Craig Lang's.
Well, actually, I'm asking for
arrangement.
any, the costs that we as a city incur when we leave what we have here and go outside and use outside. Yes.
And again, just for clarification, correct me if I'm wrong, are you asking for consultant costs that we use to augment services that we do in-house? In other words, we have a city engineer,
Yes.
and sometimes we have capital projects, and we'll hire Hubble Rock and Clark to do design services, or an architect to do design services. Do you want those identified as part of our capital projects costs? Or do you want to know a list of all the consultants that we utilize for essentially every purpose?
Well,
or
that's
a
too big,
combination
John.
thereof?
But what I'm just looking for is, I'm looking for what we do in-house and what we ask for outside of what we already have here. When we're spending out there, and as we face these deficits moving into 10, 11, 12, I mean, we're looking at this thing getting wider and wider. I'd like to see some, what more can we do in-house that we're already paying for, so that we don't firm it and have to pay on top of what we've already done.
Again, just for clarification, and take the planning department, for example, where there's been reductions in the planning department, and so now I think it's staffed to handle day-to-day activities, but if there were to be some projects coming on board, you'd have to go to, I think it's
Carlisle
Boardman,
Right.
to take a look and examine those plans. That's a consultant.
Right.
It's a consultant that augments a reduction in our workforce.
Right.
And so what I'm trying to, I don't want to give you meaningless numbers.
Sure.
And that's why I'm trying to get a clarification. We have an engineering department as well that does day-to-day work. And yet when it's time for a large project, we may hire an outside consultant engineer for that capital project, and any costs thereof are part of that capital project cost. Public Works has a street.
And I understand what you're saying. If we can do it, if we can't do it, I certainly understand, but I guess it would be more an analysis of if we can do it. If we have the staff or the wherewithal to do some of this. That's where I'm.
Yeah, see, part of the problem is we've been cutting back on staff. Actually, we're down, what, 42 or 47? What did you say?
47.
47 since 2003. And so that would be
I
one of the
understand that. I
factors.
understand we've reduced our staff and we may not be able to do some of the stuff that we used to do.
Right.
I'm not asking for the staff,
Right.
you
And
know.
if I can give an example. We negotiate labor contracts, essentially in-house, we utilize the IBD process.
Mhm.
There comes a point when you may want to utilize and bring in a labor attorney to look at some final contractual language. Those costs are more, well, money's better spent in that respect than having a labor attorney in-house to look at contracts every 2 or 3 years. Mark Steinbeck, I think, is a licensed architect. He also runs the building, he's also director of building and zoning. And if we had a large project that would require an architect's time in actually developing schematic design, design development, and construction documents, you're better off hiring consultants than you are pulling the director of building and zoning off of that.
Okay.
And so I think what city management might want to do is take a look at what we pay consultants and essentially what they're used for, and then give an a mini business case, if you will, as to why we use a consultant as opposed to going in-house.
Very good.
And then from that point forward, we can indicate if we want to use consultants, essentially why we are using one as opposed to going in-house.
And I understand that, I love it how I can throw it out there and you can get, bring it back to me in a little bit more of a capsule form. I don't expect that by next week, but I sure would like to look at that. I would like to look at a business plan when we use consultants, and do we have to in the in-house or do we not? Because as we move ahead with these budgets, this is just another area that we have to look at.
I know that some cities don't have a city engineer, and they use consultants for everything.
Right.
And those, it may behoove those cities to take a look, because chances are, if they're large enough, they're better off having in-house staff as opposed to paying someone an exorbitant amount of money on an hourly basis. We'll be happy to take a look.
Thank you.
On another area of the budget, I noticed on the way coming down here that along Livernois, which is our Troy Road, there have been some patching and filling in along there because there's been some areas that need to be done. And that's good, but we have quite a few roads that are under county jurisdiction. If they're not doing the maintenance on those, and we have to perform maintenance on those because it's a safety concern, are we able to recoup those funds from the county or not?
Well, actually, Livernois is a county road,
Okay.
so that will be up to the county to maintain.
Okay.
As far as what contracts we have contracts to plow. We used to contract a sweep. That's no longer a contract that we have with them. They contract out their own sweeping. I'm not aware that we're doing any patching work on an emergency situation, but I
Okay, so that-
No, we are not doing any patching. The only emergency work that we do out there is if there's an accident.
Right.
Or if there's, a failure that we need to put a barricade on, or in some instances if the traffic signals go out for a period of time, police department requests so they don't have to have staff out there. We put four-way stop signs and so forth like that. But that's the extent of our emergency support for the county.
Now, how is the county doing on the maintenance on the roads within Troy? Because they're having budget difficulties too.
Yeah.
And the reason I ask that is that that's an area that citizens continually ask about, especially coming off of a hard winter. And they still haven't quite figured out that, not all the roads are city roads or county roads. So how are they doing on that?
First off, just again, for purposes of television, Rochester Road and Coolidge are the only two north and southbound roads that are ours.
Okay.
And then Waddles and Square Lake are the other, that's the east and west roads. All the rest are the Road Commission for Oakland County. If you ever have a problem on any of those roads, go to rcocweb.org. That's rcocweb.org. They also have a phone number that you can call in and make a complaint about any of those roads. Of course, you can also contact us and we'll pass on that lovely news to them, which we do quite regularly. As far as how their funding's going, it is in very, very bad shape. Even with the stimulus funds, the amount of road work that is happening in Oakland County continues to decrease rather substantively. In fact, there are, I should back up. I was about to say something and I was talking to Steve. Oakland County is not to this point yet, but in the presentation that we received from Oakland County, there are other counties in Michigan that are letting their asphalt roads go back to gravel because they can no longer maintain them. This isn't just an Oakland County issue. This is a statewide county funding issue, and it's really how county roads are funded. County roads are funded strictly off of the per gallon tax capture that they get. And 19 cents per gallon is what's charged at the state level for gas taxes. And of course, with the downturn in the economy, people are driving less. When gas prices went up, people were driving lesser. And remember, it's on a per gallon basis, it's not a per dollar basis. So they've actually seen a decrease in the amount of monies that are coming in off of those gas taxes. And the money's just not enough to be able to maintain the road infrastructure. So they are on very, very difficult times. The city of Troy is going to see two projects in our jurisdiction being done by Road Commission in the upcoming, well, is it this upcoming year or is it next year, Steve? We have 1.5 miles worth of roads being addressed thanks to the stimulus funds.
They're planning on doing those roads this year. One is crossed between Equity and Big Beaver, and the other is John R. between 14 Mile and Maple. I believe those are concrete roads that are in very poor condition that will be receiving a mill and overlay, similar to what was done on Livernois a few years ago between Big Beaver and Maple Road. And that particular project, Livernois, was a tri-party project.
Right, yes.
And this was a few years ago. We used the tri-party funds for that. Last year, we used tri-party funds for slab replacements. And at the next council meeting, there will be an item on the agenda proposing to use tri-party funds.
And we're getting into John's capital budget.
We're getting into capital, that's why I was hesitant to ask it.
We're getting into John's capital.
Let's go there.
Sorry, John.
Okay. Anybody else? Questions?
Actually, no, it's not a question. It's different, sorry. Okay, comments then. At the start of the budget is budget policies this city council owns. Starts on page 18, I believe.
Yes.
And I noted on page 19, the right column, fourth check down, where we establish user charges. And that paragraph has 3 sentences. And with our budgeting for outcome process, and with our discussions, we've had a little bit of a change in this direction, trying to move it more in that direction. And the first sentence and the last sentence appear to me to have a little bit different flavor to them. A little bit different definition. The first sentence includes depreciation. And then the last sentence is looking at the cash flow. And I don't believe we've been telling our staff to include the user charge depreciation costs. We wanted to have the capital costs, or the maintenance costs, and the direct costs covered. I wanted us to discuss this a little bit from a policy standpoint.
Where the funds that there is depreciation in governmental accounting is different from your private accounting. Governmental accounting, the enterprise funds, internal service funds have depreciation. General fund doesn't have depreciation per se. But we do account in our water rate structure and in our motor vehicle rate structure and so forth. That does cover our operating depreciation and replacement cost for that.
You
Our water rate, our sewer rate,
You have depreciation and replacement costs?
we have depreciation, and we also list our capital costs for that year.
Okay, so the depreciation gets basically saved for capital outlays to replace?
It could be, it's not a cash outlay, or it's an expense that does show up on the books, but there's no cash that goes for depreciation. So if you have, for example, $1 million in depreciation expense, and you budget for that, and you have a capital outlay of $2 million, whatever, there's really $1 million there that cash-wise that could be applied towards your capital purchases and so forth. we do budget for that expense. We also try to capture some of the capital, but not all the capital replacement costs.
One thing I forgot to say that I wanted to say first is that I went back in our old budgets and we've had the same statement for over 10 years. So it says here that we should cover it, but what you said is we try to cover it.
We cover our depreciation costs. We do cover that.
Okay, what about like aquatic center?
Well,
Yeah.
we know that's our goal there, which council has kind of said, is that we try to meet our operating expenses, less depreciation. So in that instance, it's been stated every year that we don't cover depreciation because we can't. But we do cover, our goal there is try to cover the operation cost, less depreciation in that instance. But all the other funds that we do have depreciation, and that is budgeted for and covered.
The golf course?
Golf courses.
I guess we are including the depreciation.
All enterprise and internal service funds, there's depreciation expense.
What's the life you're depreciating over? Do you remember?
It depends.
I'm just thinking of golf courses, like forever. I mean, as long as you maintain it, right?
Well, there's no depreciation on the land. There's the land improvements and so forth, that there's depreciation on. The land itself, there isn't any. The building, there's depreciation on. Infrastructure that goes in, there's depreciation on it. But there's a set schedule for roads, or maybe 20 or 30 years. Water mains are 50 years. It's in our audit report here somewhere. But there is a set schedule.
I've got a question. Clarification question, if I might. This is just based on earlier discussion related to recreation. Are you looking for a policy taken by the governing body that addresses the subsidy there? Release the unit charge?
Yes. I'd like to modify them. Whatever we have in place now. Whatever, yeah, resolution that they can pass on. I'd like having consistency, and that one just sticks out to me. And I'd like to clarify the statement to have consistency where funds that it's not our goal to save. And it seems like they're more recreation than hard assets.
That's why I asked. Reduce fees that pertain to infrastructure, if you will. And there's also fees that pertain to recreation program.
36. Ready for the depreciation schedule? Okay. Buildings, 50 years. Water and sewer distribution system, 50 years. Service connections, 20 years. Land improvements, 10 years. Building improvements, 20 years. Golf course equipment, 3 to 10 years. Furniture and fixtures, 3 to 10 years. Vehicles and miscellaneous equipment, depending, 2 to 20 years. That's what our depreciation schedule. It's based on our estimated useful life of those.
So it is at our discretion, it's not
Well,
GFOA?
it's more of a generally accepted accounting type for governmental.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Are there any
Thank you.
other ones in there, David? In the policy? You should highlight it?
I think the investment policies section, it hasn't been updated to match our formal investment policy, but this is just informational.
Right.
The blunt one that I put down is we definitely want to avoid bad banks and institutions. But
I'm sure it's been John's goal all
Yeah.
along.
yeah, I mean, it's just the stuff that's in our investment policy, it just hasn't been updated.
Right. Speaking of the beginning of the budget book, a lot of the highlighted areas in the light orange reflected things that have been either changes or things that we wanted to make sure to have it stand out for people as they read the budget, and I like that because it's really, there's a lot of information in here. And there's certain information that we want to make sure that people look at very strongly. So I appreciate that that was done. And you already mentioned, John, the section where we added in here, we're going to talk about the fourth, yes, right. Today, I'm not going, I'm just commenting on the budget in general, but,
I'll give all the credit for the shading to Mary Redden, who, in her reviewing of all this, thought that that was important to point out. She's always.
that's good, yes. Martin?
With respect to the defined benefit pension fund, how much of a contribution are we budgeting in our city budget to the city share?
I think right about 5 to 6% for the employer share.
And is that's based on how recent of an actuarial evaluation?
We're right in the process now of the actuarial, and we normally get it back right before fiscal year, so we'll have it probably in June or so. We get the actual rate. But we did increase what our current year's rate contribution was. We bumped that up a little bit, up to, I think, a little over 5% or so.
So we are above the current actuary rate?
We're above the
most
current,
recent,
most recent, we're above that. What it works out to be with, I'm sure everybody calls the market values, took a pretty good hit there. And but we do use a 5-year smoothing period for those, so we don't take all hit in 1 year. It's 20% each year over 5 years.
So I guess my question would be, depending on how the new actuarial evaluation comes in, are we planning to adjust for that immediately, or is there going to be a lag time?
What we'll do is, once we get that rate, then we apply that immediately to the payroll. So each payroll contribution goes into the system, and then if it's more than what we have budgeted, then we'll have to make up for that difference within the various departments.
All right. And I know last budget year, about a year ago, we talked about reimbursement of the city for expenses, administrative expenses, and I know we passed a resolution on the retirement board side, but have we actually started, because I don't know that we did anything, we never really followed up on that, or is that in this budget?
That's in the current year's budget. We do have that for the retirement system. As met today, the LDFA board met, and that was increased substantially. The DDA has been as part of our whole deficit solving situation. We increased that substantially. We also get money from the Brown bill and the retirement system.
Any others? Pardon? Go ahead, David.
There's no one else that already spoken. One thing I brought up during our budget discussions was the fees that the council gets reimbursed for internet access and fax machines. It's not an item that's broken out. Do you know if that is broken out on the disc or? Okay, I'd like either get a pointer for where to find it if it's not obvious, and or a report, one or the other. How much that is.
Well, it's under the city council line items. It's one of your contractual or other service and charges. Do you know what that line item is per se, or is it telephone, or is it?
Telephone, yeah.
Probably under telephone. There's a telephone line item. I think fax and telephone, whatever else is under that one account. There's a separate line item for it.
Then it's a quarterly report also in your agenda.
Yeah, of course. Given the projection and the outlook, I mean, it's not something that's really publicly discussed much. The fact that we get our telephone or a telephone line paid for fax, fax machine supplies, and internet access for our home addresses just by being council members. I think that's more of a utility. We don't get our gas and our electric paid by the city. I think that the council should reduce that expense in the budget. I don't know how many of my colleagues agree or not, but I think that's an item that should be eliminated.
Got it?
I don't think it should be eliminated. This is the first year, and only because other people paid my way a whole lot of places. This is the first year this job isn't costing money. It costs all of us money. And we too have family budgets. I could live with, give a set amount per person. And if yours is $40 a month and somebody else is $80 a month, maybe we all need to shop a little better. But I'm tickled that you and Martin can afford not to do that. Quite honestly, I can't. It's $500 a year. That's what you pay me for my fax and phone and cable access. So.
Well, and the other point is that when we switch to the electronic use of getting our information and communicating back and forth, it is part of doing the job. And I know that it says in the charter that those expenses should be covered. It also could cover gas if you're going, meetings, that kind of stuff. And lots of times over the years, many of us have not charged that. And so if you compare what council receives as far as salary and other cities that are like ours is a lot less. And so I feel that really folks are getting a good amount for their amount. And frankly, it's such a small amount, it's not going to make a difference in this total budget. It's like a little drop in the bucket. There's some bigger things that we should look at.
$3,750.
Yeah.
Well, I would concur that it's not worth spending a whole lot of discussion time on, but I do think that, not the travel part, I think we just need to have reasonable expenditures. There's value, as Bob has mentioned, as Councilman Dutcher has mentioned, going to various things. And my concern, at least as one member of council, is simply with the telephone and internet, because I think that even without being on council, we would all have a telephone and internet anyway. And as far as the internet's concerned, we're coming here to pick up our mail and things anyway, and there's a wireless hotspot. And the city computer that we have has wireless internet access capabilities. And so by the way, the city hotspot at the library is really good. But it's not really worth a whole lot of conversations. We either do it or we don't.
And I guess the charter language really covers that when it says tools needed, and it just seems a perception of which tools, which people need in order to do it. Whether you decide to take it or whether you're able to do without, that would appear to be something.
Are you folks ready for public comment? Do you have any other questions on things? Yes,
And again, I'm sorry that I stumbled here, but if this matter is not resolved now, we're going to the elected to a public hearing, so why doesn't everybody speak on this issue and solve it? Just a suggestion.
Christina?
I think maybe rather than mandated that there is no funds available, perhaps we can take a hard look at whether we can afford it. If we cannot, then we have that service. If we can afford it, then we should pay for it and not charge the city. I think it should be an elected service. I would go back to the monies that are paid out monthly. I think I brought this up through the years. $175 a month or something before taxes. And again, sometimes I wondered if we ought not to set an example of sorts, even though it's pennies on the dollar compared to what we've asked some of our staff to do. But I can't do that. You can't treat that like the reimbursement for the phone or the internet. You can't say, keep this. You know, it has to be a council decision to keep that. And, you know, I for one would be very willing to not have that check mailed every month, but put it in the general fund. It's a little bit. But not unless it was something that the whole council, you can't just do. I think
Christina,
even
that would
charter.
require a charter change.
I think
It's
so.
in the charter.
I think that's what I was told at one point. But, you know, I can afford my internet, and I'm going to take a hard, long look at that and not charging the city.
Anybody else? Wait.
It's fine with me not to charge it. I think I've benefited from that. I know what I'm getting before that I'm not getting a check. I don't pay much attention to it. But I can certainly do without that with whatever the rest of the council wants to do. But it's going to start effective this next budget year. Not sending me a check quarterly or whatever we get, that's fine with me. Let's make that contribution.
Anybody else want to comment on this? Are you folks ready for public comment?
No, we have a hand over here.
Oh, sorry, John, you moved your seat and couldn't see
I'm
us.
sorry.
You're over there.
Just trying to clarification, not to be argumentative, although I was taught by the gentleman. What I'm hearing is that it's a charter requirement that someone put a call on a bona fide offense, and some folks on the governing body don't wish to call on that offense. Perhaps we should budget for it, and the money's not going to evaporate, so if it's used by a particular member that feels it's an expense, it is, and if it's not, the money stays in the general fund. Is that an acceptable solution?
Well, I would prefer that we, just, I think that if there's $500 per council member for travel expenses and nothing for internet and telephone, then I would be happy with that. So it would be basically $3,500 a year for the entire council.
For expenses,
For travel only. Travel and conferences outside of Metro Detroit. Travel outside of Metro Detroit and conferences anywhere.
You can't do that on $500 a person.
Just, it mandates a triage.
I don't understand.
You don't understand?
Yeah, I guess what I'm asking is, are you saying, okay, but instead of having whatever it is we have for travel now, which is a few $1,000s more than $3,500, that travel should be limited to $500 a person for the year?
That's right.
Mary?
Well, not very many people are traveling, A. And B, if it is real travel for those conferences and so on, it's voted at the table. So it's a decision that's made per conference, and we all have a chance to vote on it, to have a say on that. That's a different issue than what tools do we need in order to do the job. So for those, I thought that was fine. For people who said either, we'd like to write a check back, if you receive a salary and want to write a check back to the general fund, that can be done. Or if you want to shop better and see if you can find a cheaper rate for the tools that we're using, that's fine. Or for those who, at this point, need those tools, then that should be allowed as well. The charter makes that language evident. I think it's the idea of cutting back is wonderful. But again, putting the money there and subtracting it and seeing where we are in a year based on these things makes sense.
Anybody else? David?
I just have a hard time seeing where there's switching devices where you can share your home phone on your fax. I mean, you can do both where it automatically switches. I don't see where any of us would be without a home phone in regular life, like Councilman Howard brought up. So I think having the expenditure for a council member to have a home phone or fax line is wasteful. Internet, if we had a fixed amount monthly, it's limited. I'm open to that. But we don't need two ones in our house, obviously.
Quite honestly, that's all the city pays for. I would not have a second internet connection in my house without my need for it to do this job. And that's the $40 a month that the city pays, which is a third of my cable bill. Second cable connection.
Oh.
I wouldn't have. I have one TV. I have one computer other than mine. So for me, it is a cost of this job.
Wayne?
I'm fine with it being an individual decision, being used to that. That's, as individuals decide what we want to do. Certain people that want to continue to get that, fine. Others that don't, that's fine, but that's okay with me, it's a problem. That's my concern. Enough time.
We'll do the amount of budget. That's right.
Budget, and we can give it back. Do it.
I have another concern too. It has nothing to do with the city council budget. It has to do with the budget stabilization fund. And my the premise that I'll start with, by the way, is that I don't want us to use any budget stabilization fund or fund reserve, undesignated, unreserved fund balance. However, if you're going to use something, I don't think it should be the budget stabilization fund. So I'll just say that.
Are you talking about for this budget?
I'm talking about for this budget, yeah. We're using $250,000 from the BSF. And I would prefer that we leave the BSF untouched.
When we had our sessions where we were balancing the budget, we went through all this. We went around and we made an agreement. I know you spoke against it at that time too. But that was one of the avenues in order to balance. And we had reached a consensus on that.
Right, and the other thing I'm adding to the conversation is that if you're going to use it, basically if you're going to use $250,000 from somewhere, what I'm saying is I think we would be better off using it from our undesignated, unreserved, basically our leftover funds, since we are hitting up against the limit anyway.
But when I brought that up at our sessions,
well, we have
people weren't going for that.
We have and we have
additional.
I think we have additional information now with respect to that. We're getting close to the end of the fiscal year, and I think that helps too in the decision making process. But again, it's not a major issue because you're taking $250 from somewhere.
Would you like a report from staff on the difference as long as we can make up the money in the budget? Or which fund it comes from? So that we come to the 11th and we'll have a a change suddenly in the budget? Is that what you're asking for, Martin?
Well, I'm not just answering your question. I'm not really asking for anything. I think I would hope that we all have the ability to understand the conceptual framework of the differences between where these funds are coming from and where they're going. So it's just a matter of making a decision. And I don't expect anybody to change how they approach this. I just want to express that as an option.
Robin?
It's funny you should say that, Martin, because when I read the budget and saw that we were going to have over the upper limit left over, I was like, whoa, wait a minute, why are we taking money out? But we have a resolution on the books that says that $250,000 will come from the budget stabilization fund. So that the other allocation that can be done is we can do that, and John can figure out how at the end of the year to put that $250,000 back if we end up with it in fund balance.
And that would work.
And so, I mean, kind of, that's where I am with you as well. I'm kind of like, well, our upper limit is, now we may need it, we may be glad to have that beyond the upper limit, so that would be a decision we can make that way. But we have a resolution that says it has to come out of here.
Especially given the problems with the refuse fund.
Yeah.
We need to be really looking at that one. Yes, Christina?
Could the current resolution that Councilwoman Beltramini referenced be amended instead of waiting the whole year? Because there is the excess?
That's the same night as the budget discussion, and we have to amend it, so I like it, how they do anything.
I can't hear you, Robin.
It's the same night as we vote on the budget. That's the first time we reconsider or amend that
that's right.
resolution, so.
I love it.
I mean, we wouldn't have to wait the whole year, we would just have to wait until the audited statements come in.
And it would be brought to us.
We could do council, we could do a budget amendment at any time.
Sure.
If it's after the audit is complete and we're at this certain amount, then if it's council's desire to switch money from a transfer from the budget stabilization instead of from fund balance, we could do that. Either way, in the future years, we are going to need either fund balance or budget stabilization to assist us a little bit here, but that can be done. Budget amendment can be done at any time. So, more likely when a budget audit is done, it should be during the next fiscal year.
Right. Any other ones you want to bring up?
Sure, not to be an alarmist, but I am alarmed. And that's the, I think we all are, with the long-term projections. Because even if we flatline, even if we flatline, our expenditures are still a revenue issue. And there's still an increasing, the triangle's getting bigger, as you move out to the right. And, I'm curious if we're even doing enough this year. And because you could continue to increase the tax rate by $0.5 mil each year, but you have to continuously do that every year, at least until the real estate market flatline. Of course, that would require other people too, but even if they went for it, you'd be looking at a fairly significant tax increase. So I think that we do need to be looking at the sustainability of this municipal government, and it's going to require a lot of work. And I just don't understand how we can allow our costs to continue to increase when we know for a fact that our revenues are going to be going down. We don't know how much they're going to be going down, but we know for a fact that this real estate market is very ugly. And, if you just go online and search through the assessor's website, just look at your neighbor's assessment, just as an example, random houses out of the phone book, and you can see that there are a lot of homes that are right up against the taxable levels, right up against the assessed value. And we've been into some of these foreclosed houses, by the way. They're not anything like your house, I can assure you. And so, there's an issue of declining real estate stock in addition to the fact that the value is decreasing. So I'm concerned, and I'm not necessarily so sure that we really accomplished a whole lot with this year's budget, other than technically balancing it, because we can't have a budget without it being balanced. A lot of these things we get are one time. We're obviously not going to be having early buyouts every year because of the council people. So I'm curious as to, and I would assume that we're going to be addressing this proactively, almost from the get-go. We're going to be basically doing year-round budgeting.
You might want to think, even though it may not be popular, you might want to think too that 95% of the residential property value is paying less in taxes. You may have looked at, you keep it at a certain rate, you adjust the rate so they pay the same tax amount. So there's not a major reduction. Because that you're going to be faced too as another revenue. It may not be popular, but it's another thing to look at because you're going to see more and more the tax revenue, people are paying less and less and less in taxes because the values are going down and down and down. So, well, do you hold the line and say, well, let's let the people pay the same amount they paid this year? And what does that mean to our tax rate versus reducing their tax bill by $40 or $45 or whatever the next year, and $80 the next year or whatever? It's just something to look at, which that would have a major impact on the whole revenue source too. So it's something that.
John?
Point made is excellent by Martin and Jack. And just taking a look at out 5 years, the $15 million deficit, that's roughly 25% of the general fund. And at that time, personnel costs would be 80% of that 25%. And then take a look at what the gap if we don't make drastic changes in 5 years.
Mayor? We looked at the possibility, I think we got something from SEDCOG, we also got something from our current city manager, acting city manager, about crossing the lines of cities and coming together and looking at bringing departments together. And I'm very interested in looking at that. I'd like to see it on our agenda as soon as possible, because I think that we have to look at what we can do here, but we have to also look outside of that. And it's been discussed, kind of just floating out there, but I'd like to really look at that as a council.
Right, and I think that there are a number of things that we can do, but we're also going to have some fixed costs that we're always going to have, and some that are out of our control, like, for example, the increase in salt. And if we have, again, another year like we had this year, electricity costs.
71% of our general budget is personnel.
Yes, and personnel, but we also have to have a certain number of people to do the services that are required. And that's, again, why I'm asking about doing some kind of a survey of the citizenry to find out what areas they are interested in as far as, because push comes to shove, if they're going to not have certain services, they have to have some say-so, in prioritizing. And that gives us good information for when we have our discussions, too. John?
Yeah, Council, we do have some framework in place now to address our basic priority needs and work our way, start to look at those. And the last tier of services that are provided, we'll have to start, taking a closer look at all those as soon as this budget's adopted, and start taking a look at those and work our way through and maybe look at all those to make sure that's still what council has in mind there. But there are some services that we'll start taking a look at.
Yes, go ahead.
The city council has, if a representative democracy, may wish first to take a look at those outputs and priorities and come together as to what you think is important for the community that you represent, and then get a survey. You want to take that, that's an option, it's up to you, but that's an option you want to take, is to sit down with the representatives of the community. And decide what you think is a blueprint for the future, and then calibrate it by certain.
Any others? Okay, public comment? We'll take public comment. Audrey Zembrowski?
Just was referring to about putting something in the water bill. I'll tell you what, if anybody's got anything to say, they can watch it on council, they can come here, they can say what's on their mind. They can't, they have to have it put in their water bill and ask the question. You know what? I wouldn't want that question from them. I would dump it in the garbage. File 13, whatever you want to do with it. Because they can come here and say, just like I do, get up and say, hey, this is what's on my mind, and I feel like we should do this. And just one thing about money being spent when you go someplace. Okay, when I'm at the library, and when there's a dinner or anything, I sit there and debate on something. If the dinner costs $50, $25 or more, I sit there and say to the director, hey, as long as you got somebody going, let them bring us back a report. That can go for a book. That can go for a reference book. I don't go to those dinners. I will go to one thing a year just to say I'm on the advisory board and I do represent the advisory board. And I'll pick something that I know is going to be interesting, but it will not be, it might be just a pickup little thing here and something to drink. But I'll listen to the speakers, but I don't go to all these things. I mean, it's got to be something very important. But I think that as far as giving to note in the water bill, that to me would be a waste of time because you would get all kinds of comments from people that don't even really care about the city, but they're going to have a comment in there to make it anyway. Let them come to the council meeting. Let them speak up at a council meeting. That's what they should do.
I think the suggestion was to do some type of a survey that would be a more statistical representation rather than the library. Mark?
I got a little thing here. Maybe the big movie deal that's going to come to Troy could save you all. That could be a good one. As far as the questionnaire, I think you got a Troy update thing that comes out to a lot of Troy residents already on a regular basis. And somehow, even though, you know, I don't want to say the guy's name, but Lambert seems to have a big thing to notify the people if the city's looking for any type of input. Those two areas, at least the citizens are aware that the city's asking for help. And I think that might help this people out because, like, we were sitting here and she says, are they talking? And I said, yeah, but we don't really count, so that we don't need to hear what they're saying because I didn't want to interrupt you. Also, you know, neighborhoods like the Glenmore neighborhood up there that doesn't have sidewalks, and when you kind of separate which neighborhoods cost more or less, certain neighborhoods had certain type of people in them that had their neighborhoods exempt from the sidewalk rule. Now I know in Berkeley when they need help, they go through the city and they X off squares. And when you do 20,000 squares of sidewalk, that brings in some revenue, but the Glenmore subdivision doesn't have to worry about that because they don't have sidewalks, and there's other ones. Because people are coming up to me more and more, and I keep telling them, I just defend my turf. My turf is the city of Troy in polluting areas. And as far as the Troy city goes, the police department, they have asked many times for the privilege of having people register with their building, knowing what goes on in the building, called building inspectors. Now I do talk to your bondholders about once or twice a month explaining my problems with the city of Troy because they have very low building standards in the city of Troy. A high wind could probably take out many neighborhoods in Troy, so you cannot compare a house built in junk in the city of Troy with other houses because I know who built a lot of those houses in Troy, and I went many times up to the building commission asking, why are you building junk in the city of Troy? They say it's the city council lets them do it. Well, now we're having trouble taxing a home that's only worth $200,000 really. No matter, it's in Troy, but they took the prime land and built junk on it instead of real pieces of property. And so we're going to have more and more trouble trying to tax junk at high rates. Because also, there is a lot of revenue loss in this city because we don't use internal sources. I'll talk to some of the people here. There's a lot of internal sources that could be used. The schools could be painting our school buses and our police cars. It doesn't take that big brain surgeon for the kids to paint the cars. Now, I know how much money's involved, but I spend a lot of time in detention, and I'm sure there's a lot of labor there. there to be used in the school system. To teach our kids there's more to schools than being teachers. Now, I've talked to some of the union people because I've been a union person my whole life, and I'm trying to slow them down a little bit, but it's kind of hard when they see red meat in the city of Troy, because the city of Troy has a bad reputation across the United States as far as labor goes. As far as you giving your people internet access, I think you should, because how does the people even talk to the city councils? Now, I've been notified, Mayor, not to call you again by the police department. I didn't mean to scare you, but you're one of the only person that when I call you, I get a response from somebody. Because I call other people, I get no responses. I'm sorry that I put you in the loop, but I will forego that, and I'll just use other means necessary. As far as grants go, I thought you guys had a grant writer in this city, but I guess when Tom Kaminsky left, you guys lost your grant writer. I think that's very needed in this city, and I don't understand why does a city of 80,000 people doesn't have one person that writes a grant. Because I'm holding back $1 million worth of grants to this city because you guys believe in pollution. And when that cap and trade hits, because it's going to go hit, I got about 20, 30 buildings that's going to be put in this cap and trade thing because, like I said, when your police department offered me any type of services to move out of the city of Troy, I consider myself not a Troy resident anymore, and I consider that not a threat, but I will redouble my efforts to help out the insurance agencies to increase the prices of these homes in the city of Troy because of the poor construction is going to do to rebuild these houses at higher prices. And that's all I got to say tonight.
Is there anyone else that wants to make public comment? If not, we're in adjournment, and we'll see we're back on the 4th.